everyone, Richard Carlton here. I'm here with Jacob Taylor, who's self-burritoing himself, and so I'm going to be here guiding us through this live stream today. We're going to be talking and kind of cleaning up and finishing the conversation about FileMaker 20.3, which was released. For those of you who have been paying attention to Discord prior to this, we have a test server we're going to be playing with today. In this broadcast, we're going to be covering the conversation with Jacob Taylor here. About the FileMaker 2023 is the marketing name for it, but it's FileMaker 20.3, right? So it's the release that was last week. There were a number of features we talked about, most of this yesterday. We spent a lot of time talking to Hansa. The short version of the conversation with Hansa was that a couple kind of areas where you have complex relationships, those operations where FileMaker's wrestling with a big, nasty spider diagram will be better performing, more performant, I shall say, or maybe I should phrase it another way. If you have a giant spider diagram that you screwed up or someone else screwed up and you have to deal with it, it will suck less with FileMaker 20.3. The one downside that we've seen is that closing the FileMaker file FileMaker seems to do some more cleanup when it's at that point. And so there's a little bit of closing from the time you say close the file and it finishes the closing script. At that point, it's doing cache cleanup, pushing things out, doing some cleanup. That process is a little bit slower. But Hans and I, as we were talking yesterday, if I could make the FileMaker itself run faster, the copy of Pro run faster, generally go run faster. And then if something has to be slower, defer that to when I hit Command Q or whatever, I walk away at the end of the day, or I go get a drink or something. I think that's a good trade. That's a good trade. So that's what's going on. So some of you may not be able to get to this domain. If you go to this, I'm going to pop a new window right here. So what we're going to do, we're inviting the audience to participate in our demo. If you can go to here, stream.rcc.com, if you hit return and you get this right here, that means that you can talk to the server. Now, what's interesting, Canberra, some of you might be blocking Amazon or on port 5003, but today's demo is how to get past that. Oh! And so if you can go to your browser and type this in and you get this, then you can still get into FileMaker, because if you're allowing port 80 or 443 normal web traffic to go through to Amazon, which most places have to because half the internet runs on Amazon, like Dropbox and all these services and things like that. A lot of Apple services run. Apple has its own data centers, but they also co-locate and cross-pollinate with Amazon, right, in some of their facilities, right? That's why when you download stuff on Apple so fast is because they roll their own, but they also use Amazon quite a bit. So see if this works in a browser, because that'll be really interesting, okay? We're going to get that momentarily. So this is fmtrain.tv, where every day we're doing FileMaker training, right? I say this 6 minutes into the show, right? And today is the last deep dive on 20.3. Tomorrow, Nick Hunter returns. Just one day this week, and then he'll be around more often going forward. Christian Schmidt will be around on Thursday talking about Monkey Bread 13.5. I'm not sure what's in 13.5. I'm sure it's something that you absolutely have to have. So that's the upcoming broadcast schedule. Yesterday, we covered performance with Hansa. We talked about that briefly. If you have a current license for the FileMaker platform, if you have a current license for the FileMaker platform, which means you have a perpetual license and you have maintenance, or you have a subscription that is current, then 20.3 is a free update for you. The question people always ask is, should they update this immediately? I would say that at the client level, the pro level, feel free to update it and keep the other one on your computer at the same time. Jacob promptly violated all our rules here at RCC by installing it on like a bunch of servers that afternoon. Whatever I say, good, like let's behave, set a good example. And Jacob said, F that stuff. I'm going to install it everywhere and just see if it can blow up, right?
Yep.
So Jacob
you do a sudden upgrade and you see if there's screaming.
So Jacob has the grenade and he pulled the pins and started throwing grenades every which way. And then he ran out of the room and left me there to pick up the mess. So nothing is blown up yet.
No messes. Yeah.
But that was Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm still I'm waiting for
It's
the shoe to drop on that one. So yeah.
yeah, it's development only. So we had some issues with 20.2. Sorry, I experienced issues with 20.2 server side. This is a server only conversation. Um, and so I'm basically not endorsing it due to the nature and weirdness of the issues that I ran into. 20.1, that's right, 2 versions back now. That one seems fine. We ran that on our development servers for a while. Per Richard here, that's why I immediately installed 20.3, same thing on our development servers. And that is to get the necessary time testing to find out. Because they're not heavily loaded servers. They only have a few people on them. It's my engineers from our company that are accessing them, so they can come yell at me if there's a problem or something like that, and we can get that early telemetry. That said, I haven't seen anybody complain, and I haven't noticed any issues so far.
Okay, so far. So recapping what we know about this, there's a lot of operating system updates. In fact, we're going to go through the technical notes on this, but we're going to let's cover the tunneling part first, Jacob, and then we'll go through the technical notes. The document, we're going to help you out with the documentation a little bit today. We have a seeing eye dog that can tell us how the documentation is supposed to be. We're going to cover that in a little bit. So we talked about the performance yesterday. We talked loosely about the idea that you have this developer utility section where you can create a run. Well, you used to be able to create runtimes, things like that. Most people almost never use the developer utilities over here. Then Claris decided that they would make all these available through the command line, which is great. And so we talked about that a little bit. So then we want to talk about simplified administration with HTTP tunneling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the Claris engineering blog right here. They wrote a blog on this. The problem is that the blog is not sufficiently precise. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to read through their blog, and then I'm going to show you Richard's annotated bits of this a little bit. Yep. So first off, the idea is that Claris had and Jacob, feel free to stop me at some point, but Claris has had, and I used to have this problem with 3Com back in the day. I don't even know if 3Com's still a business anymore, but they would have, they wouldn't allow port 5003 traffic in or out of their network, but they allowed port 80/443 traffic in and out of the network. So for those of you who are beginners, 80 and what are port numbers? Port numbers, for lack of a better, if you understand what I say AM FM radio is, if you're 20 years old, I don't know how to explain to you port numbers. Jacob, do you want to try to explain a port number to a 20-year-old?
Yeah, there's 65,000 of them on a computer. Certain of them are pre-assigned. A port is essentially a window on each thing. So if you're going to create a communications link between two computers, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's talking, somebody's replying. I'm using hands in the little camera thing.
Yep.
So you have a port on servers, which is kind of the receiving end of a request. Those ports really matter. So 80 and 443, 80 is web, like old school, unencrypted. 443 is HTTPS, as you all might know it. Those are just the standard. They're assigned ports. There's an authority who literally is like you'd register those ports with them and say, we're going to use 443 for HTTPS. There's a bunch of other registrations like that.
I'm going to interrupt right here. So for those of you familiar with radio, or radio, and which is still a big thing, even Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all this stuff use radio waves.
Your band registered.
Yeah, if you're talking on a certain frequency, the other person has to be listening for that frequency. And if the other person isn't listening for that frequency, they don't hear. So you could talk all day, and if you're not listening for it, then on that you could say, well, I'm listening to the radio. Well, what frequency? Well, I don't know what the frequency. Trust me on this. You have to be talking on one side and listening on the same one. If you're not, you'll never hear the other person. So FileMaker has historically used 5003. It's actually reserved for Claris, for FileMaker Incorporated. It's reserved for them. It's been this way since the beginning of dawn of time. But the problem is a lot of companies don't know what FileMaker is. They don't trust FileMaker. Like Sandia Labs with nuclear weapons and all those sorts of crazy stuff down there. They have like super cyber security, and their firewalls are probably pretty serious. And if they're going to let any traffic through, they might let port 80 traffic through and port 443 traffic through, because otherwise their employees can't get on Facebook and tell each other when the Christmas party is, right? And so a lot of Twitter and Facebook and all these websites use 80 and 443. So if Claris was able to somehow jigger the 5003 to be on port 80, it's literally something I've asked for literally 33 years, right? Well, Claris just finally did this like a week ago. So when you ask, if you're patient enough, either you will die of old age or Claris will build it for you. One of the two things will happen. And so what they did is they built a checkbox. It's called HTTPS tunneling. So when I say 80 and 443, I'm saying 80 as a reference point. That's basic web traffic that's not encrypted. Everything that Claris is doing is 443. So once again, that's almost identically the same thing, but that frequency, port number, is reserved for basic web traffic that is encrypted with an SSL certificate. That's all that means, right? But I say 80 because a lot of people know what 80 is. A lot of people don't know what 443 is because they didn't learn beyond that. So, yeah. So how do you affect this? So what I'm going to do before we get into we'll show it. I'm just going to show it to you real quick here. So at the FileMaker Pro level, I'm in FileMaker Pro, and everyone can see my screen.
And you're looking at the host menu, so you can't touch any of that.
I can't touch it. It's locked me out.
You got to cancel it. Can't even exit. Yep.
There we go. Settings right here. At the bottom, if you have FileMaker 20.3, you'll have this feature right here. This feature right here is a lot like the use advanced tools. If you turn advanced tools on or off, it doesn't take effect until you quit Pro and reopen it. HTTP tunneling is the same way. You turn it on, you have to quit, reopen it. So then what happens is that all traffic from, and this is important, so please listen to me, all the traffic that this client is going to interact with, but beyond, if local database doesn't change anything, but any traffic it's going to interact with is going to be on port 443 on the HTTPS. That's very, very important. I haven't turned it on. Right now I'm logged on probably to a database, or I should be logged on to a database.
And the reason it's important is very specifically because if you enable that checkbox, you can then no longer talk to a FileMaker server over the standard port 5003.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't really. The road to hell here is very slippery, and I'm trying to. Yeah. I want to. Well, I guess we could talk about the limitations here, this a little bit, but so here's the web server. So what this is that the FileMaker server has to have the tunneling on, and your copy of Pro has to have the tunneling on, and so it means you have to have 20.3 server. And then you have to go through, and the server has to be the Linux variant. It doesn't work on Mac or Windows yet. It may never work on Windows. We're not sure. This has to do with kind of the Linux, Unix operating systems. It's apparently it lends itself pretty easily to doing this on Windows. I think it's more work. I think Claris would deal with this if they had enough people ask for it. Like if you're a serious enterprise shop and you use Windows and you have like 100 or 200 or 500 seats of FileMaker, they're probably going to want to listen to you complain about that. So I'm in FileMaker server. I'm going to go to configuration down here. I'm going to go to FileMaker clients. And down at the bottom, FileMaker clients is tunneling enabled. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to bring up my revised limitations document right here, which I wrote this yesterday. And so what this is, we took, Claris has this engineering blog you're going to go through here momentarily, but what I'm going to go through is these important limitations or caveats about this, because the Claris document is not, as I can see it, causing confusion for people. So you saw me enable the tunneling. In fact, if I go over here back to Pro real quick, I'm just going to go through it. So tunneling's already on my FileMaker server. If I'm over here in Pro and I say settings, I say use tunneling, it says starts required. So I'm going to quit FileMaker. Boop. It's out. I'm going to reopen it. Boop. And now it looks the same. In fact, it doesn't in any way show anything that indicates tunneling is on. It's totally transparent. I'm going to say go to hosts, and let me just look at DBW2 for fun, just for a moment. This is my internal server. It doesn't have tunneling enabled. Connection failed, nothing's there. DBW4, connection failed, nothing's there. If I go to stream.rcc.com, it shows up because on the FileMaker server side, we had enabled it and then restarted the server. So that's important. So I'm going to go and log in. And here we go, admin, password, and we're in. Now, to be very clear, it works and acts and quacks identically as it would otherwise, right? In fact, if I come over here to dashboard, there's 10 of you logged in. This is excellent. Now, this is an important little caveat here, and it's about to be listed here. You're like, well, this is really, someone logged out.
We have
No one
one
logged
web
out.
direct.
What's that?
We have one web direct. Who's
One
our web
web
direct?
direct smart ass here. That's fine. That's totally good. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to this database here. We have all these people here. It doesn't really tell you how they're logged in.
Yeah, it's the far right column that would show that information. And if you hover, you see the different versions people are using. Nice. You guys are all in 20.3. Fantastic.
It doesn't tell you how the person's logged in. Now here's the important point on this. Let's go back to this PDF here, or my little document right here. Here we go. We're going to read along this together. In FileMaker Pro, enabling HTTPS tunneling. So if it's black, it's Claris' writing. If it's blue, it's me helping them. Enabling it to stop file sharing with clients. Okay, so peer-to-peer, this is not supported with peer-to-peer. If you're using peer-to-peer sharing, it's going to get killed and turned off someday, and it won't be available. So please quit using it. And I think that's all this mostly says. I point out that FileMaker Go does not support HTTPS tunneling. It's Pro on Mac and Windows support it, along with the Linux server. Okay, beginner. Yep. I said WebDirect. So people are going to ask me, well, what about WebDirect? WebDirect already uses port 443. Okay. For some of you that just trust me on that. Okay. This is a line that Claire said I had to rewrite this. When in FileMaker Pro, enabling HTTPS tunneling forces Pro to only use connections to any FileMaker server via 443. Okay. Said another way, when enabling tunneling on Pro, that specific installation of Pro cannot use port 503 to talk to any FileMaker server. So when you're on Pro, it's a binary choice. It's either tunneling or no tunneling, and that's for that installation of FileMaker. Now, if you had 2 copies of FileMaker running, one with tunneling and one without, and you run both apps at the same time, that might work. I have not tried that before one of you asked that question. Mark, if we have questions, feel free to jump in, okay? So these are all, this blue stuff is all the things that I thought up, the questions that I had that were not super clear. That's why I wrote this in here, okay? Unlike FileMaker Pro, enabling tunneling on FileMaker server allows server to either host either on port 5003 or 443 on a client-by-client basis. Such an important statement here, okay? The server can, if you turn it on, the server can switch hit. It's not like it's not one or the other, right? On Pro, you're locked in. It's one or the other. On server, it can switch hit between clients that say have 5003 and some that are on the tunneling, okay? Communication, this is right here, between FileMaker server and data API, WebDirect, blah, 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 will still continue to work on 5003. This is misleading right here. Because WebDirect, we're talking about the WebDirect worker on a second machine. This is on a secondary machine. So this is basically, this is bad writing again. Because right here it says communication between FileMaker server and WebDirect.
That information is for me.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That information is clarifying DAPI, WebDirect server, all of the other services. Probably XML should have been listed there, but wasn't. Will continue to use the actual data port to talk to the FileMaker server, which is port 5003.
So I'm going to rewrite this for server deployments that include a secondary machine, comma, communication between and the, I'm going to put the word service right here, because an end user reads this and they say server and WebDirect uses 5003. Trust me, I know how people are. It's just sufficiently vague, so I've just fixed that. Okay. Did you understand why what I do? This is very common right here. This is my day. My day is spent trying to make this understandable to normal humans. When HTTP funneling is enabled in FileMaker server, FileMaker Pro clients cannot be forced. So you cannot remotely force the tunneling to be enabled, right? If you come over to FileMaker, let me just state this real quick right here. Settings. You cannot forcibly push these items on here, okay? So you can't forcibly tell your client to turn this on. You can't forcibly tell your client to use advanced tools. You can't forcibly tell your client to blow out the memory, wherever that.
Yeah, not from the server side. What are you looking for?
The cache dumpy thingy.
That's on general. It's a button. Delete.
Oh, right there. Okay, I thought it was under
Yep.
memory. Okay, yeah. So it's a memory function. Yeah. So you can't remote force these on the user. Okay, that's all they're saying over here. Both the client server must have HTTP tunneling preference setting manually enabled and the apps restarted. When I say apps, I'm also talking about the FileMaker server, whatever that includes, before the tunneling is enabled, right? Now, as a side note, we'll get to that, and then I'll let you wave your hand, Jacob. Enterprise and SBA customers may choose that FileMaker Pro HTTP enabled at the time of installation by using the assisted install text file. For those of you who don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But if you're doing an install FileMaker, there's this little text file that you can put in there that could have its license key in it and some other setting information. Tell the file to always open like the launcher file for your corporation, that kind of thing.
Yep. I love that setting, actually.
Okay.
That has pleased several enterprise level customers because, for example, if you all are a big company and you have a department that uses an app, one FileMaker app, for example, you can pre-program that department to only ever like launch FileMaker, goes direct into it. And if you have then also set up, for example, you're a Microsoft you're on a Microsoft domain or something like that, and you have people logging in with their Microsoft, not the credentials, right? It goes in the background and like logs you in with your Windows stuff. So if you have that set up on your network, the whole thing's just automatic. They double click FileMaker on their computer. They are now in the database as their Windows user, fully authed, no question, it's just done. It's brilliant.
This one right here is a pet peeve of Mr. Taylor. He has tantrums periodically at the company. We have to censor him when he does this. When certain things happen in FileMaker server won't report them on the logs at all. And this is one of those things, right?
Yep.
And so it makes it nearly impossible to troubleshoot things on server sometimes.
It's one of the things I'm consistently emailing Claris tech support to we'll call it report bugs about. And the bugs are, you can turn on an extremely interesting feature like this, and we validated it doesn't print it anywhere in the logs. It doesn't, when you've turned it on, it doesn't note it when FileMaker server starts up, for example. You could make arguments about where it should be logged and stuff like that. So we just look at all the different places. There's no notes, nothing. It doesn't even say that I turned the feature on.
Yeah. So there is, the only place you can tell whether it's running or not is this get function called get network protocol. Now, back in the day, for those who've been around a block a long time, get network protocol used to do important things. It would tell you that the network you were using was an Apple Talk protocol. It could be a Novell IPX protocol. That's before Jacob was born, probably. And then a TCP/IP. Lately, there's only TCP/IP. Well, they've gone back and added a second item to this. So if you're using tunneling, it will report back HTTPS. So if you run this function on Pro, it's going to report back. What it's doing is telling you the setting of that preference. So in Pro, it'll come over here and it'll tell you this setting up here, this setting right here. It tells you whether it's checked or not, okay? If you run the get network protocol function on FileMaker server via PSOS or SASE, it returns that checkbox setting in the FileMaker server config dialog. It does not indicate how the client's connected. Oh, I tested this personally. You didn't even know this one. See, I taught Jacob something. I feel good about that. And
that's a weird way to do that, but also,
So I checked it because I had a client that was connected, like some of you connected with TCP/IP, and then or 5003, and then I ran, but then it was tunneling was enabled on the server. Then I told to run a PSOS script, and it came back and reported back it was HTTPS. So it's not about the current client who triggered the client that triggered these things. Nuh-uh. It's telling you about the server has checked the checkbox. I mean, this is educational, it's useful, but once again, this was bolted together and thrown together for an enterprise customer, and then engineering at Claris because most of the people have not been down there for 30 years. Like the problem is sometimes it happens when you deal with a platform for a long time. Listen, the management team has not only been down there, the current management team, anywhere between a year and maybe 7 or 8 years. Well, we've been requesting for so long that after 5, 10, 15 years, we gave up asking for it. And so when the current team hears about a request, they're like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. We've never heard that before. And some of us have been around so long that we're like, I got tired of beating my head against the wall asking for this. We gave up. So that's kind of the benefit of a legacy platform is that it's legacy. It's awesome. It does a lot of great stuff. The downside is sometimes you have to keep repeating yourself and keep asking for things because sooner or later someone might down there hear it and realize it's a good idea. And so that's what happened with this. Literally, I used to beat my head against the wall with back in the day with Palm handheld computing and 3Com and then US Robotics and all that stuff. And their networks, I was building solutions for them and their networks were hostile towards port 5003. And I had to do some really weird, janky stuff to try to get connectivity in and through their network. It was a real problem. This would have solved it like that. So questions about this? Comment, code to go. Can't remotely force the use of HTTP tunneling, but given that you won't open port 5003 on the server, you have to enable connected. I'm not following that comment, Margaret.
Yeah, it's just because you can't force it from the server side. That's why I also am specifying from the server side, because you can use the auto install.txt or Windows registry settings or whatever if you have that kind of control over the computer. Or yeah, right, if it's an unmanaged environment, you're going to go yell at people to check the box.
Yeah, unmanaged. I love that. If you're in an unmanaged environment, you go yell at people, check the box. Yeah, and quit and reopen. Okay. So yeah, so this is actually kind of a big deal, right? I thought the performance would be more impactful. And I think for some I've had a number of engineers come to me and say that 20.3 seemed faster. Of course, then when Hansa did testing yesterday, questions, Jacob Taylor, questions, thoughts, ideas. You want to go over the technical specifications? I guess we could do that real quick.
Sure. Yeah.
It's nothing overly radical, so I'm going to go back to, well, that's the admin. Let me see. Here we go. There's the, okay. Oh, let's go through the tunneling thing here real quick. So here's the tunneling. This is their blog entry. Okay. So for tunneling to work, you have to have Ubuntu 2204. Okay. And so if you have a Mac server or a Windows server, it's not supported yet. And I might say yet because it seems like Apple or Claris could add it to the Mac pretty easily, but not to Windows pretty easily, was the understanding that I...
There was some commentary. It would be basically challenging on Windows. So we don't know if it's coming to Windows. It certainly works on Ubuntu today. I can say that now. So. Yeah,
because we're using it right now. Let's see. So I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more. So this is the current, forget the secondary machine. Most people don't use secondary machines. So what you have is this is the FM server process, the main database process. It will talk to the WebDirect process, which is it WebD or what is the WebDirect, the process on your server? This is FM server, and then the WebDirect process here.
Yeah, I don't remember the binary name of it.
Yeah, so. Yeah, so what happens is that 5003, the clients are talking directly to the database server. Now, when you enable tunneling, I thought that this would just change to 4003, but what Claris actually jury-rigged is basically you could have this third-party firewall proxy if you wanted, but basically 443 is going through to the web server, which is on Linux, the Nginx, right? Mm-hmm. Web server. Yep. And so I told Jacob, and then someone else had comment on this, hey, is this going to cause a performance hit because you're going through this process to this process, and it's an extra process, and isn't that slower?
Right, under the theory that you've added a step, right?
Yeah. If you have to do more work, ain't it slower? Basic English, right? And the answer is? No.
I mean, maybe. I'm sure someone could make a showing of a very slightly a very slight difference in performance between the two. I would expect the answer is no. Basically, they'll be the same. You actually may benefit from other things. So, and I validated this when we were doing some testing yesterday with Richard. So in especially on Nginx. I think this is true on the Mac one. So again, we'll see if it comes to the Mac server at some point here. But at least on the Ubuntu one, they enable, so there's different versions of HTTP. Sorry, we're going to learn a couple things today. And the old one, which is the one that you all know probably from the 90s, if you have any familiarity with that at all, you put in a request to the server, and for the most part, you get a response. And that's it. You send it, you're waiting, and it comes back. So newer versions, that's like an HTTP. Technically, it's 1.1. I'm not going to get into the why there's a 1.0 and a 1.1.
Yeah, 1.1's been around for a long time, right?
Yeah, go read Wikipedia if you want to learn about that, because they'll tell you everything. But there's a 2, and technically there's a 3 also. But 2 is the one I'm going to talk about here. HTTP 2 is enabled on the Nginx out of the box by default. Claris turns it on, so cool. What that lets you do is, rather than where I said just before, it's send a request, wait for one to come back. They add a concept of having multiple requests in flight simultaneously. I think 8 is the default, but that's just kind of what everyone went, it's good enough. The number can be higher. I'll leave it at that. So if you think about that, each of those requests could be, I don't know, a find request, looking for records, pulling the next 25, like the things that you do. You think of those as the operations that you're going to ask the server for in FileMaker. We're kind of mixing. I'm the computer today. So you make those requests. You could do multiple of them at the same time. The important part, though, is that FileMaker server can also respond to multiple of them at the same time. So there is an opportunity here for better performance than we're getting today. I don't know. That's going to be on somebody like Hansa to kind of do some validation and see, is it a performance wash? That kind of comparison stuff. One of the reasons outside of FileMaker that they're working on the new versions of HTTP is to help, because as you may know, everybody's on their cell phone now in 2023, and so those networks, while sometimes amazing, often are not. You may be familiar with you may be familiar, and the newer versions of HTTP help with that. They perform better. High latency, crappy networks, dropping stuff all the the problems with being out in the boonies on cell. It doesn't always work amazingly, and so they're working on technical things to help with that. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up in this stream is because at some point, FileMaker may benefit from those things, right? So it may not just be, we can switch from our old school, been using it since 1996, TCP. Actually, somebody posted Clay Mackel registering port 5003 even, and that's probably from the 80s, honestly. It's older than that.
Oh, yeah.
But, so when they convert to the tunneling, it's possible that I'll say in certain circumstances or for certain customers, it may actually be more performant. We're going to wait and see. Someone else like Hansa will be able to do testing on stuff like that and let us know if that's the case, or if not, maybe there's.
Yeah, I don't know that we're getting the performance benefit yet, because this once again is so new that the server doesn't even make log entries about it at all.
Yeah.
So This is clearly something that Claris built. It's like every once in a while there'll be a bet, and this is a true story. The engineers at Claris will bet each other they could build something, and some of the biggest innovations at Claris happened when someone bet someone else that over a weekend they could build some gee whiz shit at home in their garage. Is literally what happened, right? Like Steve Jobs and Wozniak back in the day were in their garage. That's how FileMaker Go was built. There was an argument, and a bet was made at lunch at Claris. I wasn't there for this. I was told all about this after the fact by the people involved. And Chris Krim took FileMaker Pro home and hacked it through Xcode and got it to work on Go and brought it back to the office on Monday. And everyone shit their pants that FileMaker Pro was adapted to work on Go. And then after that, management got behind it, and then the rest is history, right? I think that this tunneling thing, along with HTTP versions 2 and 3, et cetera, will give us more horsepower down the road, but maybe not immediately today with this release. Who knows? So Canberra 57, who's now retired, He was one of the keepers of nuclear weapons, and I mean that very seriously. He says, use HTTP tunneling and not the default FM ports is one less hole in your corporate firewall. So the IT department might be a bit happier with you and your FileMaker deployment, and it got a bunch of upvotes.
This feature kind of seemed like something they were going to slip in on the side that was like, an enterprise client, we don't know who, but somebody big was like, hey, we should do that. And they were like, I don't know, let's duct tape something together really quick. So they do it, they put it in there. They come into the testing group with us, and I'm not going to reveal anything about that, but just that we're in it. And they asked the partners, hey, is this interesting, right? Like, we could do a tunneling thing. Is that an interesting thing? Like, should we make it a real feature? Should it be some little secret, text flag enabled thing for this one client, something like that, right? And all the partners were like, whoa, this is massive, and responded with that and gave different examples of clients that it would have helped with, contracts they could have landed, literally license sales that were like basically blocked because IT wouldn't allow port 5000.
Yeah, Claris could sell more product, right?
Yeah. I mean, and so anyway, with that positive feedback, they said, all right, cool. And so they put a little checkbox on the server and put one in Pro, did that. And then now this is the topic because it's huge, actually. And lots of people who are not enterprise IT may appreciate this for reasons that are different from the enterprise people. So.
Yep. Well, mostly your IT people won't want to string you up and skin you alive, as opposed to if you ask them to carve a hole in the firewall for 5003. So anyway, okay, this is their general PR release. I'm going to jump to technical specifications. So this is the tech stuff that everyone says is boring and not important until it bites you in the ass and it becomes super important. These are all the languages it supports. There's nothing really new or different there. 20.x. Oh, we're getting to Jacob's favorite little spot here in the document. Okay, just be cool with this. So there's going to be. Hey, there's going to be a quiz here for people who are paying attention. If you want Jacob to love you and to tell everyone how great you are, you need to be prepared to answer the question and pay attention.
Yeah.
So
put your window at the right place and then tell me what's wrong with the picture.
Yeah, so we're going to get here. So this is FileMaker. Well, this is because they went on Thanksgiving and
I know.
So 20.x, go 20.x, blah, 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 blah. You have to have certain operating systems supported. There's something funky here on this screen. Would one of you like to, and it's not us picking on people, it's just that it's like why I rewrite stuff a lot of times because that helps for training and explanation.
Well, I mean, I'm probably the only one that reads things so carefully that I notice disagreement.
Like I just look at I would look at Pro, I'd see this, and I read these numbers, ding, 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 and I'd keep going, right? Ding, 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 ding.
Christian got it in Discord.
Yeah, there you go. So what it says right here, it says Mac OS Sonoma, which is Mac OS 14, that Claris added support in version 20.3. Except that if you go back to 20.2, it says it was compatible with 20.2. So this is just one of those like little confusing moments. There was initial support in 20.2 with additional bug fixes and corrections in 20.3. So it was improved. So I would simply say it was 20.2 is the initial and 20.3 makes it better. There's some crashes and stupid things that have been fixed.
Yeah, and I would just tell you, if you're on Sonoma, please install 20.3. You'll have a much better time.
Yeah. Although the issue with the script renumbering where it blows up, that goes back to at least Ventura. So there's this bug where if you're renaming a script and renaming a script and renaming, you're like 20 or 30 scripts, eventually it will cartwheel and explode. Right, literally. And so now before it explodes and crashes, it will slow down and act real funky. That's your chance to hit Command or Control Q and quit the application before it dies and then reopen it. But if you persist in having it get slower and slower, then eventually will blow up. And so that's been fixed along with the self-join relationship bug, which I demonstrated 15 times or so during the live streams. We're training people on relationships and it kept blowing up. So FileMaker server. So this is important. You've got the Windows, you got the Mac, you got Ubuntu, you got these long-term supports, right? So any of these would do the the tunneling, right? Or the
Nope.
certain, or which
Just the
one?
top two. Just the top two. The
Oh,
difference is 2004 versus 2204.
I missed that.
2204 is the only Ubuntu. It has to be the latest supported Ubuntu, period.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's why I'm giving you softballs, Jacob
Yep.
Taylor, to hit
Yep.
over the field.
And I don't know about the desktop, but that won't affect anything. So that you have a FileMaker server that you can click stuff on if you want to.
Yeah,
It's
that's kind
it's
of
like
nice.
running it on a Mac in the corner or having it on Windows on purpose so that you have a desktop environment. You can
Okay,
click
so
stuff.
for Windows machine with 2 gigs of RAM.
Why
All
would
right,
someone use it? That's a good question from Christian Schmidt. Why would someone use Ubuntu 20 if 22 is possible? Um,
good question. Why is that? So
the
this
only
for them
reasons
to
I
tell
can
that.
think of for intentionally preferring an older Linux is because you have some other application that runs only on that version, which is that's a problem on Linux, much more than even Windows or Mac, where you have like an app that's kind of specific to a version. You have a huge issue with that on Linux because they change everything every release is the short version. And so everybody compiles their software kind of targeted at certain versions that are out. And a version is like a set of software. I'm not talking about one individual piece of software, but like the collection of libraries and things that you might depend on. Claris has actually complained about this in the private forums because it's a real challenge deploying software on Linux. It's true. But that said, no, if you're on Ubuntu 20 and you can use 2204, please do.
Yeah.
You'll generally have a better experience. 2404, you may have picked up on the year month release dates by now. 2404 is coming out next spring. Obviously, FileMaker Server doesn't support it yet because it's not out yet. But at that point, once Claris gets their first release out, we might start looking at that and we'll play with it and tell you when it's ready. I've been pretty
Okay.
pleased with the progression of the server product, but
I don't use any Windows clients with at least 16 gigs of memory and a solid state drive. And if you're not doing that, then
yeah,
you're asking for trouble. And that's just on the client side. On the server side, I guess you could get away with that. But isn't Linux a little lighter on the memory
it
capacity
is. Yep.
requirements? Okay.
Yeah. The operating system on Linux, especially if it's a server and not because they note the Ubuntu, you can put the desktop environment and stuff on there too. If you go server only, this would be command line for your server pretty much. It doesn't use a lot of RAM at all to get booted up. I think our web server for all our websites, I feel like it's overpowered. It's a medium. It has a dual core and 4 gigs of RAM. About 3.5 of those gigs are sitting there idle the whole day.
That's on Linux, right?
Yeah,
2022.
correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. And so if you
Okay.
put a FileMaker server on there, FileMaker server uses a little more RAM than that. And then, PSOS, like some of those things can use RAM based on how many records they're dealing with and this kind of stuff. So you have to account for like more than the baseline. But yeah, just in general, Ubuntu's lighter on RAM than Windows and other things. So
Code to Go says some people use an older version of operating system because it has passed a security audit, and the new operating system has not passed a security audit yet. So that would make
okay.
sense. Yeah, sure.
I actually don't understand the context for that because the ones I know that are like that, where you do an audit and that takes a long time, and thus, right, you don't want to change things suddenly. That's what is that? There's the certified version of the SSL libraries everybody in government has to use.
Yeah.
FIPS. I was blanking on the name for that. Like I know if you get FIPS certified, there's implications like that. I don't know for other things though, and I also additionally don't know if FileMaker even runs on like a FIPS SSL or something like that. That would be interesting to test actually. But
Christian Schmidt says the Claris commandment: you shall not put anything besides FileMaker server on your FileMaker server, and that's promptly followed by people putting copies of Pro on their server and running them in parallel, right? So
yep.
I try not to do that, but some people do that, and
Yeah.
then they say it's great, and then it works until the day it doesn't. Monkey Bread Software.
He's responding to Labo.
Oh, they're talking back and forth about stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Labo asked about Windows Server support. Richard, would you scroll us to the Windows Server support? So that's what we're looking at. And that's correct. Windows Server 2016 is no longer supported and has not been for several versions. I don't deploy on it anymore. Windows Server 2019 is the compatibility option. Windows Server 2022 is what I would recommend. At some point, Claris will dump 2019, but I don't know when that is. Probably not soon because that one's got at least another full year of actual in-market support from Microsoft.
Well, probably a lot of people have 2019 servers, right? So that's part of the
Mhm.
deal. So in one sense, what would be the reasonable reason benefit to enable tunneling? You want to try, Jacob Taylor?
Am I allowed to be sarcastic? You are working around organizational problems via technical solutions.
All right, and the answer I would say is that the IT department will not open 5003, and so because you really want to access the FileMaker server, and you know that they allow port 80 and 443 traffic through, that you enable it that way. So that's two answers that said kind of the same thing.
Yeah, yours is more polite than mine.
All right, everyone, see you. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!